Hello, I'm Helen Good, and I'm part of the Elizabethan Star Chamber project, which is trying to make sense of the National Archives class STAC 5. This is being recorded in August 2021, and for the past 17 months, I've been privileged to read plays with a great company called Beyond Shakespeare. And today, as an experiment, perhaps as a pilot, some of the company have very kindly agreed to read some Star Chamber with me. Now, we're going to follow the Beyond Shakespeare method, and we are just going to read the stuff and then maybe discuss it. So, reading with us today, and got the list. We are the first who is reading John Aldred and a Clerk.
Hi, I'm Steve Longstaff, based in the northwest of England.
And reading another Clerk and Hugh Topping.
Aliki, Chapple, also based in the northwest of England.
Reading Elizabeth Cave and the first Mr. Atherton.
Rachael, actor on the East Coast.
And reading Elizabeth Doliffe, Leonard Willan, and a second Mr. Atherton.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm one part of Rachael, apparently.
Reading Elizabeth Smarthwaite, Robert Dalton, and the third and final Mr. Atherton.
Liza Graham, actor, singer, whatever else in London.
Reading Edward Wakefield, Rafe Ellerker, and Elizabeth Winstanley.
Alan Scott, not an actor, not an academic, but based in East Anglia.
Reading Walter Cave and Alice Winstanley.
Hello, I'm Greg, and I'm looking forward to reading words that real people said, not just actors.
Well, sometimes the actors are better. And finally, reading James Ellerker and Ellen Winstanley.
Briony Sparrow, actor and real person in the East Midlands.
Good. The first case is Cave and Ellerker, and it's from 1593. The curtain rises, and John Aldred is discovered taking evidence for Walter Cave, the complainant.
We are met for the examinations of witnesses to be taken by virtue of Her Majesty's commission upon their oaths at Kingston upon Hull this 18th day of September in the 34 year of the reign of our sovereign Lady Elizabeth, by the grace of God, of England, France and Ireland, Queen, Defender of the Faith. Before me, John Aldred, Esquire, and William Bray, and Anthony Burnsell, named in the said commission, and upon interrogatories put to them by Walter Cave, complainant, and Rafe Ellerker, and others, defendants, which commission and interrogatories will be hereunto annexed. First, the interrogatories are to be administered to the witnesses on the party in behalf of Walter Cave, gentleman, the complainant, against Ralph Ellerker, Esquire, James Ellerker, gentleman, Philip Dalton, gentleman, Robert Clark, yeoman, and Alexander Smith, yeoman, the defendants. We shall now swear the witnesses. Name.
Elizabeth Cave, wife to Walter Cave of Kingston upon Hull.
Age.
21.
Name.
Elizabeth Doliffe of Kingston upon Hull, single woman. I am 24 years old.
Name.
Elizabeth Smarthwaite, wife to William Smarthwaite of Kingston upon Hull, mariner.
Age.
50, or thereabouts.
You shall swear to make true answers to such questions as you shall be examined upon between the parties, and dispose the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, without partiality or affection to either party. So help you God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
The interrogatories may now be put.
First, whether do you know the complainant and defendants and Robert Dalton of Sutton, gentleman, or how many, or which of them do you know?
I know all the parties named.
I know all the parties named.
I know Walter Cave, Robert Dalton, and Philip Dalton.
Do you know or are you privy that Rafe Ellerker Esquire and the rest of the defendants, or how many of them, did come in and enter into the dwelling house of Walter Cave in Kingston upon Hull, yea or no? About what time did they so enter? Whether in or nigh the 22nd day of April in the 34th year of the Queen's Majesty's reign that now is, yea or no?
All the defendants except Philip Dalton entered in the house about that time, to my knowledge.
In what place of the dwelling house was Walter Cave when the defendants did enter in, whether within his dining parlour, yea or no? And did the defendants, or how many and which of them, did enter into the parlour when Walter Cave was there present, to your knowledge or remembrance?
At such time as the defendants came into the house, my husband was in the parlour where he useth to dine and sup. All the defendants except Philip Dalton came into the parlour, and Walter Cave was then there present.
What manner and how many weapons had the said defendants when they did enter and were in that house, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say.
Do you know, or did you hear Rafe Ellerker say to Walter Cave, willing him to take him, Rafe, for his mortal enemy, or any such words to that or like effect? What were the same words, or to what effect? Where or about what time heard you the same, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say.
Was Walter Cave at the time of the defendant's entrance into his house and parlour disquieted and put in fear of them, yea or no? And were his wife and all other his household and servants then and there put in fear of and by the defendants, yea or no, to your knowledge?
To my thinking, my husband, Walter Cave, and one maid servant, Elizabeth Doliffe, were disquieted and put in fear. And for me myself, I say I was put in fear by the defendants.
I was in another room of the house and I heard Walter Cave's child cry. Then I came into the parlor where I saw Walter Cave and some of the defendants striving. And then I took the child forth of the house, being afraid, and went forth.
Do you know that the said defendants were at their entering and coming into the house and in one company assembled together and riotously came into the house, yea or no? And how do you know this same?
All the defendants except Philip Dalton were together in one company, that is to say, Rafe Ellerker and James Ellerker, his brother, with Robert Clerk and Alexander Smith, the complainant, my husband, being contented, as I think, that Rafe Ellerker should come into the house. James Ellerker there rushed into the house with Rafe Ellerker, his brother. The other two defendants were the serving men. And this I know to be true because I saw it.
Did the Rafe Ellerker, at his first coming into the parlour, say to the Walter Cave these words, "What darest thou say of Robert Dalton and his wife?" or any such words to that effect? And what were the same words, to your knowledge or remembrance? And whether were the same words so spoken very earnestly and sharply to him, yea or no, and how know ye the same?
Rafe Ellerker and James Ellerker said to the complainant, "What canst thou say, or darest thou say, touching Robert Dalton, my brother-in-law, and my sister his wife?" And these words I heard spoken in very earnest and sharp manner.
What answer made Walter Cave to those words? Whether did he answer and say that Robert Dalton and his wife were papists, yea or no?
This I know to be true.
Do you know or verily believe in your conscience that the defendants did malice and bear evil will to Walter Cave, and did enter into his house partly in behalf of the quarrel and behalf of Robert Dalton, yea or no? What was his quarrel or pretended grief, to your knowledge, or as you think? Was it because Walter Cave had reported that it would be proved that he kept a seminary in his house, or such like words, yea or no?
I think that Rafe Ellerker had malice against my husband, Walter Cave, because he had reported that it would be proved that Robert Dalton kept a seminary.
Do you know or have heard credibly reported that Robert Dalton and his wife, or either of them, were indicted or convicted and are or were in York Castle for harboring a seminary contrary to the Queen's laws, yea or no?
I know that to be true.
I have heard that to be true.
I have heard.
Remind the commission.
Elizabeth Smarthwaite, your worship, wife unto William Smarthwaite of Kingston upon Hull, mariner of the age of 50 years or thereabouts, already sworn.
Continue.
I have heard that Robert Dalton was in prison for papistry, but further I cannot say.
Did Rafe Ellerker strike, cut, and wound Walter Cave upon his head at the time that he was in his parlour, yea or no? How many of the defendants were there then present, and did countenance and assist him, to your knowledge, and which or how many of the said defendants did assault and beat the said Walter Cave, to your knowledge?
At the time when the defendants, were in the house, Philip Dalton, my brother, knocked at the door desiring to come in, and my husband, Walter Cave, the complainant, said he should not come in. Whereunto the Rafe Ellerker answered that he should come in and see his mother, who was there in the house. About which matter my husband, Walter Cave, and Rafe Ellerker were wrestling to have had Philip Dalton come in. Rafe Ellerker drew his dagger and cut my husband in the head, and the other defendants, which were then in the house, were all wrestling together with my husband, Walter Cave. And further to this interrogatory, I cannot say.
Whether Master Ellerker did wound or strike my Master Cave or no, I know not. But Master Ellerker had a dagger drawn in his hand, and Master Cave's head was broken.
Was Walter Cave then holden and with violent hands against his will thrust against the walls or doors and upon a chair in the same house, yea or no? By which or how many of the said defendants was he so used, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say.
I can.
Elizabeth Smarthwaite, wife unto William Smarthwaite of Kingston upon Hull, mariner of the age of 50 years or thereabouts, already sworn.
Walter Cave's wife came into the street and cried, "Murder!" And thereupon I went into Walter Cave's house, many more being at the door. And when I came in the house, I did see two men in blue coats stand by Walter Cave on either side of him. They had him by the arms. And further to this interrogatory I cannot say.
Were the Queen's subjects in the street disquieted and put in fear by reason of the same assault, affray, and breach of Her Majesty's peace? And was it reported in the streets that there was or would be murder then in the said house, yea or no? And how know ye the same?
The wife of Master Cave went out into the street and cried, "Murder!"
I went into the street and cried that they would kill my husband.
Did you hear some of the defendants while in the house say, "Kill him," meaning Walter Cave, yea or no? Which or how many of them did say so, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say otherwise than as I have already said.
How many swords or daggers were drawn by the said defendants and of their parts in the said house, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say otherwise than as I have already said.
Master Ellerker had a sword drawn in his hand, which he held upright, and I took him by the arm and willed him, as he was a gentleman, to stay and not to lose body and goods, and kill a man cowardly. And thereupon he turned his back and went away forth of the doors, and offered not to strike in my sight, neither before nor after.
Do you know that Philip Dalton, at the time of this riot, misorder, and usage within Walter Cave's house, stood in the entry, nigh to the street door, with his sword drawn in his hand, and did stop and stay the wife and servants of Walter Cave for going forth of the house call for help, and did stop and stay other people, and would not suffer them to come into the house to make help or rescue, yea or no? And what is your knowledge of this interrogatory?
Philip Dalton stood in the entry near the door and would have stayed me, who am his sister, from crying in the street. And he had a sword in his hand, but whether it was drawn or no, I know not.
Philip Dalton stood in the entry and willed me not to go in, for there was no hurt done. But nevertheless he did not stay me, nor any other to my knowledge. And I know not whether Philip Dalton had a sword or no.
Did you hear Robert Clerk or any of the other defendants say or talk that Walter Cave might be killed or slain, although that he escaped at this time of his assaulting, and that within 40 days he might be slain, and that the gentleman would procure 40 or 60 of the men or servants of Mr. Tyrrett, Mr. Fitzwilliam, and Mr. Philip Constable to kill him? And if he escaped them, that then Mr. Rafe Ellerker would hire a man to kill Walter Cave, yea or no, or any such like words, yea or no?
I cannot say.
I cannot
say.
What words did you hear reported by the defendants, or which of them, tending to hurt or put in danger or fear of life or hurts of Walter Cave? And about what time or times and in what places did you hear the same words, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say.
I cannot say.
I cannot say.
Okay, is everybody okay to go straight on, or has anybody got a point or a question to make before we go to the witnesses for the defense? Oh gosh, yes. Greg, I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. While you sort yourself out, let's go to Eric.
No, I was just wondering, it's just interesting to have this like sort of contrasting, or well, not entirely conflicting testimonies. It's just like, yes, he had a sword, but I don't know if it was drawn, but he had it in his hand. But yeah, it's kind of making me wonder what really happened. It's very much Cluedo sort of territory.
Yeah. Are you with us, Greg?
Hopefully.
Yes.
Yes.
You are.
No, it's just, I don't know if anybody else is feeling this, but just an explanation of some of the legal terms that are coming up. Because there are a few words that aren't, I cannot think of a single one off the top of my head, but there's...
Okay, the only one I thought you might be puzzled by was seminary. A seminary is an English-born, French-trained Jesuit priest who is here against the law, and giving him shelter in your priest hole was an offence.
Interrogatory is probably really obvious.
Questions? Who else? Anybody else with a... Yeah, Rachael.
What actual year is the 34th year of Elizabeth's reign?
We're talking 1593-ish,
Okay.
93, 94, I think. Yeah, somewhere around there. The Armada is 1588, so you just count on from there. That's 30.
92 or thereabouts then.
Well, yeah, 3 because, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Rachael.
They've probably said this, but why did they barge in to kill this man? Have they gotten there yet? Has anybody said that? Has that question been asked? Why did they kill this man?
Rafe Ellerker and Walter Cave were married to sisters. A brother of those two sisters was the man who wanted to come in and Walter Cave wouldn't let him in. the mother of the family, the widowed mother of the family, was living with the Caves. Half the family were Catholic and the other half weren't. And I think that explains practically everything.
So was Elizabeth Smarthwaite just a neighbor?
Yes. Elizabeth Smarthwaite is obviously the heroine of this.
Well, she's either a heroine or a busybody or both. But she certainly seems keen to make herself look good, but so does everyone else. She also seems kind of keen to let the assailants off the hook.
Well, she said she's the only one who gives evidence that the servants got involved in the fighting, because there are two in blue coats will be the two servants, and she's the only one who gives evidence that they're holding him. But shall we pass on to the interrogatories for the defense? Yeah?
Yeah.
Everybody happy? Okay, it's John Aldred first, if John Aldred is ready to conduct some more examinations.
I have a last minute question, Helen, if that is cool with you. Is it the same clerk prosecuting and defending?
Well, the clerk belongs to the court. The clerk is not a lawyer. The lawyers have probably drawn up the questions. You will notice that leading the witness was not a problem.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, John Aldred, take it away.
Examinations of witnesses taken upon their oaths at Kingston upon Hull aforesaid, the said day and year before me, John Aldred, William Bray, and Anthony Burnsell, upon interrogatories to them ministered on the party in behalf of Rafe Ellerker and others defendants against Walter Cave complainant, which interrogatories are to be read. The witnesses are Elizabeth Cave, the wife to the said complainant of the age of 21 years or thereabouts, already sworn, and Elizabeth Doliffe of the age of 24 years or thereabouts, already sworn.
Did Rafe Ellerker, one of the defendants, before his coming to Walter Cave's house on the 22nd day of April, mentioned in the bill of complaint, send thither to know whether he might be welcome or no, and what answer had he thereof, to your knowledge or remembrance?
I don't know.
I heard Walter Cave say that Master Ellerker had sent to know whether he might come to speak with Mistress Dalton, his mother-in-law, and that Walter Cave also said that he asked Mistress Dalton whether they might come or no, and she said to him that they should come, and that thereupon the said Walter Cave was also content that they should come in to her.
How many men came with Rafe Ellerker, and after what sort? And how were they furnished with weapons, and with what manner of weapons? And were his servants more in number than ordinarily he rideth withal, to your knowledge or remembrance? And how know you the same to be true?
Rafe Ellerker useth to ride sometime with 2 men, sometime with more, and sometime with 1. And Rafe Ellerker had then 2 men, whereof one was servant to his brother-in-law, Master Robert Dalton.
Master Ellerker useth to ride sometime with 1 man, sometime with 2, sometime more, and that there was then with him his brother and 2 serving men, and what weapons they had I know not.
Did Rafe Ellerker or such company as came with him talk and drink in familiar and friendly sort with the said Walter Cave after their coming to his house? And did you hear the said Rafe Ellerker offer to send for the wine, or no?
Rafe Ellerker did offer to send for wine, and I would not suffer him, but sent for it myself. And after Rafe Ellerker, my brother-in-law, my mother, Mistress Dalton, and I drank of the wine, and whether my husband drank of it or no, I do not remember. And further, what friendly meaning was amongst them, I do not know.
Master Ellerker's man would have given money to me to have fetched wine, but Mistress Cave would not suffer me to take it, but gave me money and sent me for the wine.
Do you know the cause of their sudden falling forth, or no? Or have you heard it reported?
Philip Dalton would have come in at the door of the house, and Master Cave said he should not. And Master Ellerker desired that he might come in to ask his mother blessing. And Master Cave denied, saying that if he should ask blessing at the door, then Master Ellerker said he should come in. And thereupon, I think the falling out was.
At the time when the defendants were in the house, Philip Dalton knocked at the door desiring to come in, and my husband said he should not come in. And Rafe Ellerker answered that he should come in and see his mother, who was there in the house, about which matter my husband, Walter Cave, and Rafe Ellerker wrestled to have had Philip Dalton come in. Rafe Ellerker drew his dagger and cut my husband in the head, and the other defendants were all wrestling together with my husband.
Did you see the complainant, Walter Cave, draw his dagger before any other in the house offered to draw or lay hand upon any weapons, or no? And being drawn, whether did you see him offer to strike or stab the said Rafe Ellerker or his brother James Ellerker, two of the defendants, or either of them? And whether was he stayed by some in the company from so doing or no, and by what means, and whether he was stayed only by the arm without other violence offered at that present to your knowledge or remembrance?
I cannot say.
Did Philip Dalton, another of the defendants, come to the house of Walter Cave in the company of Rafe Ellerker or no? And what was his business to your knowledge, or as you have heard reported, or did you see Philip Dalton enter into the house of the complainant at that time, or no?
I cannot say any more than I have already disposed.
Philip Dalton did not come into the house with the Master Ellerker, but he came to the door or something after.
Next interrogatory is directed to new witnesses who must now be sworn.
I am Edward Wakefield of Kingston upon Hull, alderman, aged 54.
Leonard Willen of Kingston upon Hull, alderman, aged 60.
Robert Dalton of Kingston upon Hull, alderman, aged 41.
To swear to make true answer to such questions as you shall be examined upon between the parties, and depose the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth without partiality or affection to either parties, so help you God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Read the interrogatory.
After the foresaid falling out or affray, did not the mayor of Kingston upon Hull and his brethren send as well for the complainant as all the defendants, examining the whole cause, and what appeared unto them to have been committed by the said defendants, and what order took they therein to your knowledge?
At that time there came one to Master Mayor and his brethren, where we were assembled about the affairs of the town, and told him that there was like to be murder at the house of the complainant, Walter Cave, whereupon Master Mayor sent for Rafe Ellerker, one of the defendants, and said to him that he must make him bound to keep the peace. And Master Ellerker said he was very loath to be bound to the peace, and that it should not need, for he would not offer any force to the complainant, or any for him, as he was a gentleman. And therefore he gave Master Mayor his hand, and promised that he would not molest or draw any weapon of Walter Cave. And I did not hear or know that Rafe Ellerker did molest or trouble the said Walter Cave since that time.
I say in all things that as Edward Wakefield hath before me deposed. And further, that at the time that Rafe Ellerker said to Master Mayor that before the time of his coming to the house of Walter Cave, he sent to Walter Cave and his mother-in-law, Mistress Dalton, to know whether he might come thither or not, to see her, and that he had word sent that he might be welcome. And thereupon he went. And that Philip Dalton came to the door and would have come in after Rafe Ellerker, and Master Cave came to Philip and said that he should not come. And thereupon they grew into words, and that Rafe Ellerker did break the head of Walter Cave, which he did because Walter Cave had his dagger drawn against his brother, James Ellerker, who had nothing in his hand.
It was as Edward Wakefield and Leonard Willen have said. And further, about Michaelmas last, I was at the house of Master William Richardson, then Mayor of Kingston upon Hull, at which time there came 2 witnesses for Master Ellerker, whose names I know not, but I think they were the serving men, and deposed before the Mayor in all things as Leonard Willen has said was reported by Master Ellerker to the Mayor of Kingston upon Hull at the time of his sending for. And further, that to their knowledge there was no intent of any assault or affray at the coming of the defendants to the house of the complainant. And Master Ellerker then had a certificate of the depositions of those witnesses as taken before the Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. I would just like to say the Dalton family is enormous and very short of Christian names. This Robert Dalton is probably a 2nd or 3rd cousin. But he must be a Protestant one, because in order to be an alderman, he would have to swear to the supremacy. Okay, we've now got, this is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. We are now going into the final bill of complaint from Walter Cave. This looks as if it ought to start the proceedings, but actually very probably was written after the witness statements. Okay, Walter Cave, take a deep breath.
To the Queen's most excellent Majesty, our most gracious Sovereign, in most lamentable and humble wise complaining, sheweth your most excellent Majesty your poor, dutiful, and obedient subject and daily suppliant, Walter Cave, of your Highness's town of Kingston upon Hull, in the county of Kingston upon Hull, gentlemen, that whereas your subject is and ever from his youth have lived in his vocation in very good credit, and as good and faithful subject to your Majesty, and a quiet and peaceable manner among his neighbours in the town of Kingston upon Hull. His suit is, most gracious Sovereign, that one Rafe Ellerker of Bisbee in the county of York, gentlemen, James Ellerker, his brother, Philip Dalton, Robert Clerk, and Alexander Smith, riotous and disordered persons, the 22nd day of April last past, in riotous and unlawful manner, arrayed and armed with swords, bucklers, daggers, and other weapons in the town of Kingston upon Hull, to dissemble and meet together. And so assembled may then repair the 22nd day of April to the dwelling house of your subject in the town of Kingston upon Hull, and into the same house did violently and forcibly enter, and then and there very riotously, forcibly and unlawfully did assault and set upon your subject, being in God's peace and your Highnesses. And him did riotously, forcibly, unlawfully, and very dangerously cut and wound in the head, and him otherwise did beat and evil entreat in divers parts of his bodies, in such sort as that your subject was therewith very likely to have died. And then, and there, presently, and most wickedly by them, had been murdered, had not the neighbours of your subject near adjoining, and upon the pitiful cry of your subject's wife and family, came into the house and helped the supplicant by intercepting their wicked enterprise and resisting and withstanding their unlawful attempt. In tender consideration wherefore, and to end this riot and intolerable misdemeanour, may be duly examined in this most honourable court, and the offenders may receive condign punishments according to their deserts, to the terror and example of others. May it therefore please your most excellent Majesty, the premises tenderly considered, to grant to your subject, your Highness, grant to your subject, your Highness's most gracious writ of subpoena, to be directed to Rafe Ellerker, James Ellerker, Philip Dalton, Robert Clerk, and Alexander Smith, commanding them thereby at a certain day and on a certain pain therein to be limited, personally to appear before your Highness and your Majesty's High Court of Star Chamber, then and there to answer the premises, and further to stand and to abide such order and direction therein as to your Majesty shall seem meet and convenient, and your subject, according to his bounden duty, shall daily pray to God for the prosperous preservation of your Highness in all joy and happiness long to continue.
Thank you, Greg. that is a fairly standard bill of complaint. You have to take them with a pinch of salt. There is very little point saying I was mildly inconvenienced. Do we have any questions before we go on to the answer? Rachael.
When they say I cannot say, is that just something they're saying, or is that like a standard legal thing, like in the way that we have I plead the fifth? Does it have that connotation? Or
it doesn't have the connotation of pleading the fifth, which of course is something totally alien to the English legal system, certainly at this time. What it means is that the clerk has written, and to this interrogatory, the deponent saith she cannot say, or she cannot depose. And I've translated that for the benefit of this as I can't say.
Hello.
Liza's disappeared. Yes,
I have. I'm mysterious. So the witnesses can decline to answer a question, but a defendant doesn't have a right to silence at this time, do they?
I don't think anybody has a right to silence. I'm not entirely sure about this. I'm now treading on very dangerous ground here. What they can say, they can certainly say, I don't know, or my answer is the same as everybody else's. And they do. What was actually said and how far the commissioners for taking evidence pushed them is something we don't know. So we really don't know what the atmosphere was like in the room. Rachael.
In trials like this, would they ever collect, was it just all eyewitness testimony, or would they ever, for this particular case, did they have any physical evidence on hand, or was that not something used in this particular case, or not used in general?
The only time I've ever known it happen that there was an article, someone was accused of putting a dagger through an English Bible, a Bible written in English. And the witness had actually brought the Bible along, but nobody took any notice of that fact. What we're talking about here is sworn testimony. Shall we push on unless there's anything else? Yeah? Because we've got the response, the robust answer from two of the defendants, Rafe Ellerker and James Ellerker. Rafe, if you can go.
Yep. The joint and several demurrer and answer of Rafe Ellerker.
And James Ellerker.
Defendants to the bill of complaint of Walter Cave, gentleman, complainant.
The said defendants say, and every of them for himself saith, that the said bill of complaint is in their opinion vain and frivolous, and neither worthy to be examined in this honourable court, nor any such heinous offence, if it were true, as that it deserveth to be elsewhere heard and determined than in the place and before the magistrates of the said town of Kingston upon Hull, where it is laid in the bill to be committed. For were the offence such as is set forth in the bill to be, it seemeth, not such to these defendants as that it is meet to be brought out of the place and county where it was committed, to trouble so honourable a presence with to the hindrance of matters of far greater importance, and therefore these defendants do, and every of them for himself, doth under favour of this honourable court humbly demur in law, and demand judgment if they or any of them ought to make any other answer to the said bill. Yet Nevertheless, if these defendants shall be compelled to make any further answer to the said bill, the defendants for further answer say, and every one of them for himself saith in manner and form following.
That is to say, he, the said Rafe Ellerker, for himself saith, that whereas the complainant has married and taken to wife Elizabeth Dalton, one of the daughters of Thomas Dalton, late of Hull, aforesaid deceased, by Anne, his wife, now a widow, by which occasion of marriage, after the death of the same Thomas Dalton, his said deceased, did live and dwell with the complainant in house. And this defendant, having married another of the said Dalton's daughters, and repairing to the same town of Kingston upon Hull, about the said 22nd day of April last past, mentioned in the bill, about divers his necessary business, had, at his being there, a desire to see the widow, his wife's mother, and less that, which, though through the complainant many practices was almost wrought and brought to pass, he might not be welcome to her at the complainant's house. He sent his servant, Alexander Smith, one other of the defendants, to the said house to inquire how his mother-in-law did, and to let her and the complainant know that if his, the said Rafe's, coming thither should not be offensive to her or to the complainant, that he would most willingly see her and speak with her. And this defendant received from her that he should be to her very welcome, whereupon he
And his said brother, James Ellerker, one other of the defendants being in his company as coming to the town with him,
and attended upon only with the said Alexander Smith, repaired to the complainant's house, and were there very well entertained and bid heartily welcome in all show, both by this defendant's mother-in-law and by the complainant himself. And while this defendant and his mother-in-law were in loving and friendly talk and communication together, this defendant heard high words proceed from the complainant towards the same James Ellerker, his brother, one other of the defendants, and did see, as he admitteth, the dagger of the complainant drawn, and looking towards them more earnestly, did see the said James' hand hurt, whereby the defendant did run to them, and in running did draw his dagger, all the weapon he had about him, with a desire to part them, whose coming the complainant perceiving, and therewith suddenly, without all cause, offended, turned himself towards this defendant, and made show or semblance to strike him, which this defendant, doubting, did the more carefully look to himself. And at the last, the complainant's rage increasing and growing furious towards this defendant, he did, in his own defence, strike the complainant with his said dagger, and as he thinks, broke his head with the blow. And after that, William Smith, then mayor of the said town upon Kingston upon Hull, a man greatly devoted to the complainant, at his suit called these defendants before him, and examined all the matter, with all the circumstances, and upon due proof of the truth, found not the defendants guilty of any misdemeanour that either in his justice or favour towards the complainant he thought he could punish them for, and therefore suffered them quietly to depart from him out the town, without any imprisoning of them or any of them, and without binding them or any of them to the peace, and without any more punishing of them.
and the same James Ellerker and Philip Dalton, two other of the defendants, said that after his, the said James, and the said Rafe's coming to the complainant's house, the same Philip Dalton came thither to see his mother, and finding the door shut, knocked thereat, and it being to him opened, he, the said Philip, offered to enter in thereat, and the complainant shut the door upon him in very vigorous and despiteful manner, and thereupon, being by the said James entreated to let the same Philip come into the house to see his mother, the said James Ellerker saith that the complainant suddenly fell into a great rage and said that Philip was his enemy in his father's life, and that he should not come in thither, and withal bending his brows and drawing his dagger upon the said James's stroke at him, and hurt him grievously on his hand, which the said James received on his bare hand, having no weapon upon him, either to hurt the complainant or defend himself withal.
Withal, that the complainant is a quiet and peaceful man, and hath lived in his vocation of very good credit to the knowledge of these defendants. For as his revenue is so small, was his reputation little before he married Thomas Dalton's daughter, which was against her father's and friends' will. And by that marriage, such is his behaviour, he is so increased that he may stand in need of his own mouth to publish his own credit. And without that these defendants or any of them did assault the complainant, or violently or forcibly enter into the complainant's house, or did dangerously hurt or wound the complainant otherwise than before is expressed, or that he was in danger of death by any blow or stroke given him by the defendants or any of them, and without that, any other matter or thing contained in this bill, and this demur and answer is not answered unto, confessed and avoided, traversed or denied, as is to the knowledge of these defendants true.
All which things these defendants are ready to answer and prove, as this honourable court shall award, and pray to be dismissed with their reasonable costs in this cause wrongfully sustained.
Okay, that's the end of the first case. Well done, everybody. I'm sorry that there are a number of words which could have been better looked after. How did you find it?
Oh, they're all pretty wordy, aren't they?
Yes.
And I must admit, you did allude to the fact that the initial complaint from Walter Cave sort of appears 2/3 of the way through the transcript, which seems weird.
Yes, it was it isn't inevitable, but quite frequently the bill of complaint came after the witnesses. The final bill of complaint came after the witnesses.
Oh, right.
The witness statements had been taken. Because by the taking of the witness statements, the points at issue are organised.
Mm.
What Cave is trying to prove is that there was a riot and there was a conspiracy to riot. This whole thing was planned. And that Rafe said, "Can I come?" He brought his brother and 2 servants with him, which was not on the original invitation. And then while he was there, Philip Dalton, who definitely wasn't welcome, tried to get in.
And Philip Dalton is what? One of the
Philip
sons?
Dalton is Mrs. Cave's
Brother.
Mrs. Cave's brother and son to Widow Cave, who is living with them. I mean, Cave effectively says if she wants to bless him, she can go and do it in the street because he's a papist and he's not coming in my house.
Right.
I think. Liza.
Do you know, how did they find, I mean, what was the verdict? Do we know?
No.
And also I wondered what legally is entailed when someone is bound over to keep the peace?
It's a bit like it's a bond.
Bail, effectively, isn't it?
You say you are bound over to keep the peace in a certain sum. So if you fail to keep the peace, you then owe that sum.
So it's a bit like being on probation, but are there any like specific rules about whether you're allowed to wear a sword or?
Well, he's a gentleman, so he can wear a sword, I think. And of course you needed a knife with you for practical things like eating. Stephen.
I'm just wondering about the kind of dramatic context, if you like. So riot, my first question is, what is the punishment for riot? And my second question is to do with the relative jurisdictions. So, you know, you would imagine that riots would be kind of sorted out locally. And so what would the purpose be of seeking to go to the Star Chamber, which is, you know, stuffed full of, I don't know, privy councillors or whatever it is? I mean, it's, you know,
Yeah.
So why try to leapfrog?
If you want to cause your neighbour maximum grief, you make a Star Chamber matter of it.
Is there a kind of hurdle you have to jump over to get to Star Chamber, or do you just ask?
Yes, your case has to be accepted.
Okay.
Now, I think it's highly unlikely that this case was ever heard in Star Chamber.
But it was accepted.
Well, it was accepted insofar as they looked at it, said, yeah, riot, yes, papists, yes, let's see what the evidence is. I don't actually think that, I mean, we've got no evidence that this was ever heard. I think it's unlikely myself that this was ever heard. I mean, they had far, far, far more cases than they could ever hear.
So could it have been an intelligence gathering thing, that they accepted the case to see who was supposed to be a papist?
Yeah, I mean,
and one of these big, long Christopher Hatton lists, you know.
They're looking to see if there is anything here that the Privy Council ought to get itself be interested in. That's
so it's kind of intelligence gathering, perhaps. Yeah. Okay.
To an extent, I think. Alan.
Yeah, I must admit I'm puzzled, because quite honestly, this looks to me like it's, you know, a maximum magistrates court level material, and to get up to what was effectively the Supreme Court seems total overkill, unless there were special interests in play. Yeah,
it is total overkill, but it's how you do it. The Star Chamber enabled you to make trouble for your neighbour at very little problem, with very little expense to yourself, relatively. Aliki.
Well, we saw in what we heard in someone's testimony, I think one of the Ellerkers, that this was already taken to the local mayor, and the mayor said they had no case to answer. So
yeah.
I guess he was still so cross, Walter Cave, that he really wanted to keep taking it as far as he could.
Yeah. Stephen.
If you're going to dramatize it, I think it would be really cool if you decided that actually all of this had actually happened and that everybody was in some kind of weird small town conspiracy about it. You could make quite an interesting courtroom drama out of that. There's only two people, and they're kind of speaking up and realizing that everybody else has kind of closed ranks.
Yes. Yeah. But I think Liza's right, that the one who comes out of it best or most, I mean, you can see poor Elizabeth Cave is torn, because half of them, she's related to everybody in this case, or practically everybody. She really has a rough time with it, I think. But Elizabeth Smarthwaite, I mean, her moment has come. Yeah. And the servant too, Elizabeth Doliffe. I mean, she grabs the infant heir of the house and rushes out into the street heroically.
But where she stopped from leaving by the bloke with the sword?
Well, apparently not.
Right.
She got out into the street with the baby. Anyway, shall we pass on to the next one? Because otherwise we'll be snookered for time. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah? Yeah. Okie dokie. Now, this is Atherton and Winstanley, and we're going to start with the bill of complaint here. This is an earlier one, it's 1585. The bill of complaint is the majority of the case and is quite long, so I have divided it into chunks, and we've got 3 people reading it. So if we could say, go Atherton 1.
To the Queen's most excellent Majesty.
Most humbly complaining showeth unto your most excellent Majesty your dutiful and obedient subject Alexander Atherton of Norley in the county of Lancaster Yeoman. That whereas among sundry the great and heinous abuses committed and practiced within this your highness realm and dominions, no one is either more ungodly or pernicious than the use of sorcery, witchcraft, and enchantments, whereby diverse and sundry your highness loving subjects are most miserably tormented, spoiled, and otherwise utterly cast away and destroyed to the great displeasure of God, and to the grievous spoil and destruction of a multitude. And albeit by the sundry of your Majesty's laws and statutes, the practisers and offenders therein are to receive sharp and severe punishment. Yet, nevertheless, the froward, wicked, and perverse people will dare to attempt to practice and put inure their vile and abominable devices to attain their unlawful purposes.
So it is, most gracious sovereign, that one Rafe Osberston, late of Wigan in the said county of Lancaster, Ellen Winstanley, widow, Alice Winstanley and Elizabeth Winstanley, daughters of the said Ellen, at Pemberton the 20th of August in the 24th year of your highness' reign, did confederate and join together in this practice following. That is to say, she, the same Ellen Winstanley, then having 2 her daughters the same Alice and Elizabeth, and each of them marriageable, whom the same Ellen was willing and desirous to match and bestow in marriage without any portion or other advancement to be given with them or either of them, and well knowing that your said subject stood in good possibility to inherit a competent and reasonable living in the said county of Lancaster, they, the said Ellen, Alice, and Elizabeth, did by sundry rewards by them given to the same Rafe Osberston, procure and cause the same Rafe by sorcery, witchcraft, and enchantment, or some of those ways, to bring your said subject unlawfully to love the said Elizabeth, which device and practice of witchcraft he, the same Rafe Osberston, at Pemberton the 23rd day of August in the said 24th year of your highness' reign, to the purpose and end aforesaid did most wickedly execute and put in upon your said subject, in a potion or drink ministered unto him at Pemberton by the said Elizabeth, by the means whereof your said subject was drawn unlawfully to love the said Elizabeth, and being thus drawn hath ever since most miserably languished and pained, and in that pitiful case yet continueth without any hope of recovery, either by physic or diet.
And your said subject, although in this sort abused, yet careful for the safeguard and preservations of his life, did make means by himself and other his friends to have been matched in marriage with the said Elizabeth, which to do she, seeing the extremity your poor subject was brought unto, hath utterly refused, and yet doth. So as your poor subject by their enchantments is so extremely tortured and daily pined away by the space of these 3 years last past, as that by no possibility he is or shall be able long to endure or avoid death by the only occasion of the same. All which enchantments, sorceries, and witchcraft they, the same Ellen, Winstanley, Alice, and Elizabeth, cannot gainsay, but they have procured and caused, and both before and since the doing thereof, gave rewards unto the said Rafe for the practicing and performing of the same, to your poor subjects' utter ruin, spoil, and undoing, and contrary to your Majesty's laws and statutes, in that behalf made and provided.
And they, Ellen, Alice, and Elizabeth, not thus contented, but for mere malice and hatred born towards your poor subject, for that he and his friends have, as the truth is, charged them with their foul and lewd dealings in this behalf, now of late the 10th of December last past, have earnestly vowed in practice to slay your poor subject. And for that purpose, they, the same Ellen, Alice, and Elizabeth, accompanied with 6 other persons of very desperate and light condition, to your subject as yet unknown, all the same men being weaponed with long staves, swords, bucklers, and daggers at Norley, the said 10th day of December last before recited, forcibly and riotously did assault and set upon your poor subject, as then being sick, and 2 of his brethren and them did then and there outrageously beat and wound, and would no doubt have slain your poor subject if he had not been by some other willing to see the peace observed, by main force rescued, and so his life for that time saved.
All which said riots, routs, unlawful assemblies, bewitchings, and enchantments tending to bereave your subject of life, are for example's sake meet and needful to receive examination and severe and due punishment in your highness most honourable court of Star Chamber.
In tender consideration whereof, and for as much as your poor subject is now always resident at Physic upon the occasion before remembered, here in your highness city of London, may it therefore please your highness of your accustomed clemency to award your highness most honorable writ of subpoena unto them, the said Ellen Winstanley widow, Alice and Elizabeth Winstanley, into every of them to be directed, thereby commanding them in every of them to appear before your highness in the said court of Star Chamber at Westminster, to answer to the premises, and to stand to such further order and direction therein as to your highness most honorable counsel of the said court shall be thought most meet and convenient.
And this your poor subject shall daily pray to God for your highness long life and health, long and most prosperously to reign over us.
Okay. Does anyone want to say what they think actually happened to Alexander Atherton? Liza.
This dude is a stalker.
Yes, I agree totally. And her family got together and beat the crap out of him.
Yes, and now he's trying to plead diminished responsibility or something, because he's trying to essentially play victim and blame them for the fact that he can't control himself around Elizabeth and needs to be kept off by men with staves.
That actually was rather my view. He can't explain why he's fallen for Elizabeth because she's so totally unsuitable. He's a person of good having. She has no portion. And she is way below him, and he offers her honorable marriage and she turns him down flat. And this surprises him. I like Alexander Atherton. I really, really, really like him. Shall we see what the Winstanley women... Oh, sorry, Rachael.
No, I was going to ask, because the talking about witchcraft and saying that it's witchcraft, was this something that... Would somebody bring somebody up on charges of witchcraft and as retaliation for this in general, or is this just unique to this case? Or was this something other hangers-on, I guess, stalker-like men would do to women?
Witchcraft was something that was rather regional. This is from Pendle, Pendleton, which is close to Pendle, but it's well before. But the thing is that in parts of East Anglia, the southern parts of East Anglia especially, in Essex, in Suffolk, Sussex, whatever, and also a bit in Northern Lancashire, you will get people automatically defaulting to a witchcraft or accusation if the cow dies. It does, but yeah, I mean, he's baffled by the whole thing. Why he thinks the mother has bewitched him to fall in love with her daughter, and then when he offers honorable marriage, he gets turned down, he doesn't explain. Yeah. Glad Liza spotted that he was a stalker. It took me a little while. Okay, shall we go on and read the answer of the Winstanleys?
The joint and several answers of Ellen Winstanley.
Alice Winstanley.
And Elizabeth Winstanley.
To the false, untrue, and slanderous bill of complaint of Alexander Atherton, complainant. The said defendants say, and every of them for themselves severally saith, that the said bill of complaint is very uncertain and insufficient in the law to be answered unto for divers and sundry matters therein apparent.
Nevertheless, if these defendants, by the order of this most honourable court, shall be compelled to make any further answer to the same insufficient bill, then, for further answer and for plain declaration of the truth, these defendants say, and every of them severally saith, that as to any sorcery, witchcraft, enchantments, riot, unlawful assembly, riotous and unlawful beating, or other misdemeanour supposed by the said bill of complaint is untruly and most slanderously set forth and declared.
All of which matters these defendants, every one of them, are ready to aver and prove as this honourable court will award, and pray, and every of them prayeth to be dismissed with their costs and expenses in this behalf most wrongfully sustained.
Deposition.
Right.
Oh,
Sorry, yes. We've now into the witnesses for Atherton, so go Hugh Topping.
depositions taken at Wigan in the county of Lancaster the 3rd day of June in the 27th year of the reign of our sovereign Lady Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, France, and Ireland, Defender of the Faith, etc. Before me, Hugh Topping, gentleman, and Edward Standish, Esquire, and Gilbert Bibby, gentleman, by virtue of a commission to them and others directed out of Her Highness Court of Star Chamber on the part and behalf of Alexander Atherton, plaintiff, against Ellen Winstanley and others, defendants. Witnesses, give the clerk your names and ages.
Ellen Winstanley of Pemberton, widow of the age of 61 years.
Alice Winstanley, but the age of 19 years.
Elizabeth Winstanley of the age of 17 years.
You shall swear to make true answer to such questions as you shall be examined upon between the parties, and depose the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, without partiality or affection to either party. So help you God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
So help me God.
First, whether you do know or familiarly acquainted with one Rafe Osbaldeston, mentioned in the bill of complaint, and if you were, upon what occasion came you to such acquaintance with him, and what practices, feats, or cures attempted he at your request?
I did know Ralph Osbaldeston, and the acquaintance that I had with him grew by means that he alleged himself to be a surgeon, and that my husband, being troubled with a sore breast, Osbaldeston did take upon him to have cured the same. My husband agreed to give unto Osbaldeston 20 nobles if he could cure it, and I did promise to have given Osbaldeston 40 shillings more when he had cured my husband.
I did know Ralph Osbaldeston, mentioned in the said interrogatory, by means that he came to have cured my father of his disease, and for any other practice or dealing I had not had any at all with him.
I did know Rafe Osbaldeston, mentioned in the said interrogatory, by means that he came to have cured my father of his disease, and for any other practice or dealing I had not any at all with him.
Did the Osbaldeston persuade or tell you that he could procure love betwixt man and woman with physic and such medicines, powders he could minister for that purpose? Did he bestow any potion, powder, or medicine upon you to the end you might thereby or therewith procure love for the better marriage or advancement of Alice Winstanley and Elizabeth Winstanley, or either of them, yea or no.
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
Did the Rafe Osbaldeston deliver unto you any powder or other thing to the end that you might procure or hasten the love of William Birchall and Thomas Worley towards Alice and Elizabeth Winstanley, your daughters in marriage? Yea or no? And did you promise to Rafe Osbaldeston any money for the executing of that feat, or delivering to you the thing or powder whereby the feat might be brought to effect? Yea or no?
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
Did Rafe Osbaldeston ever send unto you for any money promised him for any purpose or service by him invented for the helping or furthering of Alice Winstanley and Elizabeth Winstanley, your daughters, in marrying? Yea or no? And if you promised him any money for that purpose, how much was the same? And what messenger did the said Rafe Osbaldeston send unto you for it? And what words or speeches passed between the said messenger and you at that time touching that matter?
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
Did you ever send Osbaldeston any cheese or other reward to appease his earnest craving you for the money promised him? Or did you wish the messenger to entreat him to come to your house and he should be paid the money promised? Yea or no?
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
Did you about the last 3 years past bestow any spiced drink or ale upon Alexander Atherton at the house of one James Waite in Pemberton? Yea or no?
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
I know nothing of this.
Did you minister any powder, potion, medicine, or drink unto Alexander Atherton? Or were you accompanied with any other that did the same to prove the practice or operation of the powder or drink, whether it would procure or hasten love? Yea or no?
I know nothing except what I have already said.
I know nothing except what I have already said.
I know nothing except what I have already said.
Thank you.
It's another vexatious litigant, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. You see, obviously there's a lot more going on. I mean, the business with the cheese is hardly invented. And then there's the messenger. And then there's the house at which there was some spiced or heated ale made, and Elizabeth got to pass him his pottle pot or whatever. I mean, obviously things have been going on, but he's got the wrong people as witnesses. He needs Osbaldeston. He needs the messenger with the cheese. He needs all sorts of other people. Also, Hugh Topping, who is in charge of the interrogation, has decided this is nonsense, because he's allowing these answers just to be written down, just as, you know, she has nothing to say on this question. She has nothing to say on this question. And had there been anything actually going on, because by failing to get a proper to act on his commission, he could be in trouble because he'd failed to get the evidence out of the witnesses. So he has a responsibility. But obviously, he's decided this is nonsense. I do like this one. Now, a local historian will be able to tell you who these people were, quite possibly, or certainly who the villages, what the villages are. Alan.
I must admit, as soon as we started on the complaint, I was actually seeing Ellen Winstanley as Mrs. Bennet, because the whole thing seemed to be predicated on a truth universally acknowledged.
Yes.
That the young man who is going to be coming into possession of a fortune must want a wife.
Well, except if she had been going to put a spell on the guy to make him love her daughter, presumably the daughter would then have agreed to marry him, whereas in this case she told him to sod off.
Yeah, sort of a reverse Mrs. Bennet, if anything.
Well, no, it's Mr. Collins, isn't it?
Oh, God, yes. Mr.
From
Collins.
this day forth, you must be a stranger to one of your parents, for your mother will never speak to you if you do not marry him, and I will never speak to you if you do. But the husband was dead. I mean, Albiston can't have been very good at his job because the husband, she's a widow now.
Well, she's 61, so
Yes, she had her children late, didn't she?
On normal basis, that was not a bad age for that period.
Right.
Yeah, and her husband had a sore breast, which I'm guessing was chest pains for a heart condition.
Yeah.
Or lung condition.
We've been talking as if this was in which country near Pendle, and it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be in the south of Lancashire, in Greater Manchester, Pemberton.
Oh, really?
And
Geography is not one of my...
It's Wigan. It's sort of between Liverpool and Manchester.
Talking about Pemberton and Norley, both of which are not far from Wigan, but in the far west of Greater Manchester, in the borough of Wigan.
The local historians will almost certainly know these names. They will almost certainly not know this case.
Well, so do we have any indication of how the court found whether the women were penalized at all, or the man was?
I think the chances that this was ever heard are as close to zero as makes no difference. I think that the clerks of the court getting these depositions would say out. Rachael.
So if Star Chamber were to throw out this case, let's say that this case was thrown out. I know the law is different now. So this is my question. So would that be the end of it? You've taken it as far as you can take it, even if it's just something to hound your neighbors, that if Star Chamber won't hear it, it's done. You can't bring this to another court.
Absolutely not. There are a lot of different courts, and an awful lot of people in Star Chamber are already up to their ears in Exchequer or Chancery or heaven knows what other courts. Star Chamber was just the icing on the cake, or for some people, or just a quick way of what Alexander Atherton actually wanted, I don't know. Perhaps he just wanted love.
It's always the best way to go about it, isn't it?
Perhaps he was going to offer to withdraw the accusation if Elizabeth married him.
Very probably, very probably. That's a thought. But yeah, Briony.
I just wanted to clarify, neither of these are the Threckingham one that you were on about to me, are they?
No, neither of them are the Threckingham. The problem with the Threckingham one is it's far too long for a single session, as it turns out. I hadn't really taken on board just how many words there are. It needs an awful lot of cutting before it's fit to read.
Stephen's waving.
Stephen.
I just wondered about the bit I was doing as the clerk. Is there any discretion amongst the clerks to the kind of interrogatories that they put, or do they have to just transmit a question that has been put together by the complainant or the defendant?
The complainant and the defendant make a list of interrogatories.
Okay. Right.
And in theory, the clerk reads them out. It's perfectly possible that they were explained. It's perfectly possible that they weren't. Nobody has actually described what it was like in the room. The closest we've got to it is a very cross letter from one of the commissioners saying, we turned up in the market town on the day at the place, but neither the none of the defendants nor the complainant turned up. So we were left sitting there clutching the interrogatories. It was a complete waste of time. But that's the closest we've got to a description of what this was like.
But the reason I asked, I suppose, is it does seem to be part of the kind of ridiculous effect of it is breaking down these strange accusations so that they're each considered individually.
Mm.
So I didn't know if there was any sort of agency there that, the clerk can go, okay, instead of this mad rant, let's break it down into the bit about the cheese and a bit about the potion and a bit about the spiced ale and just draw, sort of hang by his own.
Yeah, I truly don't know. But I do know that the interrogatories were read.
Right.
And I know that the oath is correct because that one of the clerks of Star Chamber left a little book of procedures, and in it he details the witness's oath. Alan.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that strikes me as odd is thinking in terms of modern judicial practice, the way that you're getting the interrogatories phrased with 2 or 3 clauses which are not necessarily that logically connected before you get an answer, whereas it would seem much more efficient to actually a question and answer, a question and answer.
Yes, but you see, the person who wrote the interrogatories wouldn't necessarily be there.
Hmm.
We're talking about a lawyer, possibly in London, possibly not, writing up for the client a list of interrogatories which, if properly and truthfully replied to, will prove his client's case. That's what it's for. But in fact, it means that not only are they highly leading questions, which give us a wonderful opportunity to see what's been going on, what's really been supposed to have been going on, but they also get very complicated, which is part of the joy of it. Eric.
So basically everything came down to a he said, she said thing, and it was sort of very, I mean, unless you had the dead body there kind of thing, it would have not been counted as murder.
No. If you've got a dead body, that's not Star Chamber. That's a felony.
Okay, yeah. So it goes straight to different court.
That's a complete. That's criminal law. If there's somebody's dead, well, yeah, okay. If it's an accident, then there are different rules. But Star Chamber would not hear a felony because they said there are plenty of courts which will hear felonies. Don't bother us with felonies. Alan.
So effectively, Star Chamber was dealing with what we would now call civil court matters rather than criminal?
No, misdemeanor, and they would also do riot, libel. They took stuff that they felt needed taking. Also maladministration, corruption on the part of any of the tax gatherers or customs officers, that sort of thing. They would take anything like that. Aliki.
I'm going to go back to Eric's, I think, question, though. What what constituted proof? Is everything just spoken evidence, and then you judge who you think is telling the truth or whose story adds up best?
Well, I think that nobody here is making a judgment, but when the Star Chamber heard it, yes, and they had the evidence read to them, and then they debated amongst themselves and cast votes. I mean, we've got one record, and it said Sir Robert Cecil and the Earl of Essex, arriving late, didn't vote.
Because they hadn't heard everything.
Because they hadn't heard everything, yeah.
Right. So assuming that this had made it, which we assume it hadn't, but if it had made it to Star Chamber, they'd be sitting here doing what we did and going, so this guy's a stalker, isn't he? And he's trying to get back at the women.
Yes, I mean, I think, yes, yeah, they might have done. Eric.
Was there like some sort of, well, not content warning, how do you call it? Like, did the libel exist at the time? Because obviously Atherton is going like sort of full rant, like full guns blazing, and then they just kind of go, yeah, this is a lie, this is insufficient evidence and all that stuff. And sort of, I don't know, it just seems like the complaints and the response is very sort of...
What you would then get would be an accusation of perjury. And now they heard perjury in Star Chamber. They heard quite a lot of perjury, especially if the jury had given the wrong verdict. If the jury had given what the government considered the wrong verdict, the jurors might be brought to Star Chamber for perjury because they had made an oath to give a good verdict, and they had failed. Therefore, they were perjured.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Rachael.
Wait, so if you were on a jury and they just didn't like your verdict, they could then take you to court for something else? Are you kidding me?
Not in the least. Not in the least.
Wait. So is it the
welcome to a monarchy?
If you were on a jury back then, was it the same? Was it like compulsory, like how it is in the
pretty
United
much.
States?
Yeah, pretty much. You got to get the answer. You got to get the right answer, or the government gets upset. Briony.
I'm just wondering how that would work in practice. Would they have to do them individually, the jurors, or just the whole?
Oh no, the entire jury. The entire jury in one case. Yes. In fact, very often you will get the name of the foreman and 11 others a jury. Alan.
Yeah, I was just thinking, coming back to the mention of libel, I have a feeling that things said in the Court of Parliament are out with the law of libel. I'm not sure whether that did or then applied in testimony given in court cases, and if so, vexatious claims or claims raised with Star Chamber could be used to effectively operate as a muck spreader against somebody you didn't particularly like, because they then got no recourse.
Yeah, muck spreader is a very good, I mean, the technical details I'm not sure of, but muck spreader is a very good analogy.
And then, of course, although we are pre-mass press, that could then be repeated as part of the reporting of court proceedings, and therefore you could spread the brown and sticky stuff even more widely.
Yes, because although it was the Privy Council, they were meeting in open court, and there were people in there who were reporters. Newsletters, you understand, there weren't any newspapers. Are you away, Greg?
Yes, I am. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much, Greg, for Walter Cave.
No, I enjoyed that. Well, I enjoyed the whole thing. But no, definitely if there's a chance for more, I'll vote yes. So lovely to see everyone. Take care of yourselves.
See you soon, Greg.
Bye. Okay, shall we call this recording a halt? Yep. Eric, can you pull the plug on us, please?